This is the damage caused by Russian drone strikes on the Ukrainian port of Izmail on the Danube River. Tons of grain spilled from at least 2 destroyed silos, the latest attack on Ukraine's grain infrastructure. Firefighters worked hard, but the damage will take time to repair. Izmail, across the Danube from NATO-member Romania, has been the major route out of Ukraine for grain shipments since the collapse of the Black Sea grain deal last month. There are alternatives, mostly by land, but they're costly and slow. Grain prices have risen by 15% in the last 2 weeks as the crisis deepens.
Russia is actually in a better position now than it was last year because, as we saw with the oil tankers going to Asia, Russia has found alternative ways to export its grain via rail lines. For example, the main north-south transport line is now open down to the Iranian port of Bandar Abbas. So it's found alternatives for its grain.
Hours after the attack, the Russian president spoke with his Turkish counterpart Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Vladimir Putin confirmed he would reinstate the grain initiative as soon as Russia's interests are upheld by the West, as was made clear by his spokesman.
Russia and President Putin has already said this 100 times. We are ready to return to the deal immediately. It's just that the deal must be implemented in terms of the part that concerns Russia. So far, this hasn't been done.
The grain deal was brokered by the UN and Turkey last summer. Moscow pulled out of the agreement in July, claiming that the international community had failed to assure that Russia could freely export grain and fertilizer. The Turkish president sees the Black Sea grain initiative as what he describes as a bridge of peace, but he is concerned over actions that could escalate tensions. The two leaders decided to meet face-to-face in Turkey, despite the fact that Putin hasn't left Russia since the start of the war in Ukraine, and an arrest warrant was issued by the International Criminal Court in March. There are growing signs Russia is willing to come back to the negotiating table as the crisis drags on and food prices soar, while Russia continues to wage economic warfare against Ukraine. Sinem, Koseoglu, Al Jazeera, Istanbul.
Yulia Shapovalova is in Moscow. She has more on the Kremlin's reaction to Kyiv's attempt to restore the deal.
President Erdogan is keen to persuade his Russian counterpart to resume the grain deal, and as the relationship between Russia and Turkey is vitally important for both, there is a glimmer of hope that he will be successful. President Putin has confirmed his readiness to return to the grain deal as soon as Russia's conditions are met. At the same time, Russia continues destroying Ukrainian port infrastructure, showing the world it's not going to allow any food exports from the Ukrainian ports without its participation. After having pulled out of the grain deal, it keeps its promise to consider all ships in the Black Sea sailing to and from Ukraine's ports potential carriers of military cargo. Russia says it destroys weapons arriving at the Ukrainian ports from a number of Western countries as part of military aid to the country. While the Ukrainians say Russia's targeting Ukraine's economy too by not allowing it to export its grain, which used to bring Ukraine tens of billions of dollars in profit. As we see, currently Russia is hitting Ukraine's port infrastructure. Last autumn and winter, Russia was destroying Ukraine's energy system. Before that, there were attacks on oil and gas refineries and railway facilities. So it seems like all that is part of Russia's global strategy aimed at destroying Ukraine's infrastructure to force it to surrender.